Alright, you've mastered the fundamentals of AE2 and GTNH, but what about all that other scary stuff, like subnetting, fluid crafting, P2P, IO ports, maintainers, cribs? I mean, at this point, Applied Energistics and Gregtech New Horizons has pretty much undergone like a full evolutionary divergence from other modpacks, and honestly, with its own features and quirks being constantly added to by the development team, GTNH specific AE2 information is really hard to find. But don't worry, this video's purpose is to gather and document most of the New Horizons specific knowledge that I have acquired while streaming this pack. This video is also a follow-up to my Fundamentals of AE2 video, so if you have not already watched that, please go do so before starting this video, as it covers many important concepts which we will build upon today. This video will cover the ins and outs of subnetting, no pun intended, advanced components, fluid storage interactions, and end with multiblock autocrafting. As you will see, all of these concepts spill into each other, so make sure to stay tuned from front to back for full context. Let's begin. Many of you asked about subnetting, so I intend to start with it. Subnets can be as small as 1 or 2 components, or as big as your entire main network. I generally use subnets for 3 purposes. 1. Storing the outputs of passive resource generators. 2. Containing and organizing large passive chemical processing lines. And 3. Automating a complex closed system using AE2 logistics. Generally speaking, a subnet is any network not directly connected to your main network that interacts with the contents or channels of the main network. This is quite the blanket definition, which covers all subnets you will make in GTNH. Generally though, most subnets are used to contain specific categories of items separately from your main network storage. I have many subnets, and I think it may be helpful to explain what they are and why I use them. The first and most obvious subnet is ore processing. OreProc is the most important and basic foundation of your factory, passively processing and storing millions of raw resources for refinement. OreProc has both generalized unfiltered storage for uncommon materials, as well as bulk filtered storage for specific items. Not only does OreProc take up a ton of channels, but also an accidental overflow from OreProc into main network could be catastrophic for your storage. To prevent this, we create a subnetwork, where items within can be pulled into your main network for crafting, but are stored in a different container we call the OreProc subnet. Additional subnets I have are for similar basic resources that are farmed passively, including a bee subnetwork, extreme entity crusher subnetwork, wood and plant processing subnetwork, and many more. Any of these processes overflowing into mainnet drives could be extremely hard to fix, and a subnetwork affords me some level of safety for accidentally mishandling items. I also have subnets for platline and waterline, which require lots of logic and intermediate steps. Platline has lots of ins and outs, and having a subnet to reduce mainnet channel usage and move unrefined items and fluids is quite helpful. Most subnets don't really need to be this big though. I have many smaller subnets for the automation of multiblock autocrafting, assembly lines, circuit assembly lines, and even simply to reduce the amount of channels I'm using. Many of these subnets are smaller than 8 components and don't even require ME controllers to run. For now though, let's go over some subnet IO basics. We will represent mainnet in gray covered cable and subnet in cyan covered cable. In order to allow items to be pulled between networks, we need to use a series of storage buses and interfaces. Interfaces are representatives for their network and can display a network's contents through a storage bus. Remember that storage buses will never push or pull items, so external push or pull will need to be provided to move items in a specific direction between subnets. If your subnet needs access to items or fluids from mainnet, you can add a storage bus on your subnet facing an interface from your mainnet. There is a caveat here with storage buses. When on insert/extract mode, storage buses for some unintelligible reason will ignore the filters that you apply, and instead be able to view everything on a network that it's facing. If you only want to pull salt from your mainnet interface through your subnet storage bus, you will need to filter the storage bus with salt and set it to extract only. If you want to pull an item or fluid like platinum dust and nothing else from your subnet, add a mainnet storage bus facing a subnet interface. Filter your mainnet storage bus to platinum and set it to extract only. You can do the opposite of this, which is less common, where you store items that are pushed into your subnet on your main network. Use a storage bus on your subnet, pointing into an interface from mainnet. Filter the storage bus with the item you wish to be deposited into mainnet storage and set it to insert only. Make sure that this is either sticky carded or on the highest priority for storage, otherwise items will not default to the storage bus. The same principle can be reversed if you want to always store a specific item that is pushed onto your mainnet into a subnet. You can set up a storage bus on mainnet and point it into an interface on your subnet. Again, make sure that your storage bus is filtered and set to insert only. Because your mainnet is probably fairly convoluted, sticky cards are your best friend to guarantee that your filtered item is only stored in the subnet and nowhere else. Let's go over a practical example. In order to see items stored on my ore processing network from my mainnet, I use a storage bus and a fluid bus from mainnet facing an interface and a dual interface from OreProc. This gives me one-way access to all items stored on OreProc from mainnet. Subnets also need AE power, which you can either provide through a separate energy generation method or through quartz fibers. Here is a mainnet connection providing power to my OreProc subnet via a quartz fiber. Subnetting isn't always about items and fluids though, and as demonstrated in my AE2 Fundamentals guide, you can use a subnet to move thousands of channels from your mainnet controller around your base. At the end of the day, the possibilities are endless, and subnetting will soon become your go-to for solving logistical problems in GTNH. I also wanted to cover more components, of which there are still many to learn about. Here are some more niche components that still get frequent usage from me. Let's start with the quantum ring. Quantum rings are a form of wireless AE2 connection that can work cross-dimensionally, making them wonderful for machines like void miners. Their power draw is a constant 100 EU per tick, which makes them a good high-investment wireless solution. Quantum rings are one-to-one and connect using a pair of quantum entangled singularities. When quantum entangled singularities are placed in two different quantum rings, they connect and bring 32 channels from point to point. When you set up your away-from-home quantum ring, it will need a jumpstart of AE power to initially connect, and then it will be fed energy from the connected network. Note that the corners of quantum rings do not carry any channels. The cell workbench is another powerful component, which I use very commonly. Oddly enough, the cell workbench does not require channels or power to operate. Cell workbenches allow you to filter cells to only accept specific items or fluids. I use this mainly to filter my bulk storage on subnets like ore processing. For example, on my OreProc subnet, I have one partition cell for each bulk dust that I receive from space mining, which allows me to stay organized. You can also use the cell workbench to add modifier cards such as oredict, sticky, inverter, and in 2.8 you can add a void overflow card. In order to use the workbench, simply add the cell, filter the items or fluids you want to store, and then pick up the cell. You may be compelled to press the Partition Cell button on the left, but know that this actually partitions the cell based on the items that are currently inside of it, oftentimes erasing your filters. Also note that some fluids and cells can only be partitioned with an IC2 cell of that fluid, which is probably just AE2 fluid crafting being janky. IO ports are another banger component, and they allow extremely quick transfer of items from cell to network or network to cell. Because LUV OreProc and beyond is mostly comprised of storage buses, IO ports can provide the push and pull you need to engage your storage buses, and they do it at blindingly fast speeds. Simply place a full cell into an IO port and its contents will be quickly pushed into the network. Add 3 acceleration or hyper-acceleration cards and you can move millions of items in seconds. The IO port has several modes. In the middle, you can choose from Transfer Data to Network, which will take items on a cell and deposit them into a network, and Transfer Data to Cell, which will take items stored on the network and pull them into a cell. For example, if I partition a cell to only accept salt, then put an IO port set to Transfer Data to Cell, it will pull all of the salt from the network onto a cell. Cells can be automatically pushed into or pulled from an IO port, most notably from Ender IO conduits. Level maintainers are buggy, laggy, and subject to change in 2.8. As of 2.7, Level maintainers can fit 5 different items for which the ME system will try to call a craft automatically after the filtered item dips below a certain threshold. Add the item in the left-hand box, set the threshold in the middle, set the size of the batch on the right, and press the checkmark on the far right to finish setting up. The checkmark on the left can be used to toggle crafts on and off. These things are really useful for complicated multi-step processes like circuits, or for bulk restocking long ingot crafts overnight. The problem is, maintainers are extremely buggy and oftentimes simply won't call for a craft at all. Also, because they constantly check for the levels of certain items, they are notorious TPS killers in late game. Use these with caution, and only for what cannot be done sanely otherwise. Level emitters, commonly mixed with level maintainers, are also kinda laggy due to their mechanics, but much less so than maintainers. Level emitters will look for a certain threshold of a filtered item within a network and output a configurable redstone signal when the level is above or below that threshold. You can leave them unfiltered if you want to check if a network contains any type of item, which can be useful for stuff like autocrafting on subnetworks. I also want to take this opportunity to touch again on P2P tunnels, as Invisible, a friend of mine and the first player to document antimatter automation, got so fed up with endgame players asking him dumb questions about fluid P2P, he went out of his way to ask me to include this. Okay, in all seriousness, P2P can be unintuitive and there's a lot to cover, so let's do a more in-depth touch-up on some P2P mechanics with the help of Invisible's notes. Firstly, P2P tunnels are 1 to n, meaning that you can bind one or multiple outputs to a single input. P2P needs channels, but they can get them from any network, not just the one that it's facing. This is the concept behind subnetting your mainnet channels with MEP2P. Additionally, I want to reiterate that P2P are essentially portals, and they connect the blocks that they are facing as if they were adjacent. I also want to touch on Fluid P2P, which has niche usage for its practically infinite throughput. Fluid P2P has some unique mechanics. Firstly, they are bidirectional, meaning that fluid can be sent from input to output, but also, if you push fluids into an output, Fluid P2P will try to push it back into your input. Honestly, this is probably the main culprit that makes Fluid P2P so hard to apply on automations, but it can be used to your advantage. In order to set input and output, you will need your trusty memory card. Copy a P2P frequency with shift and right click, which will set the P2P to input, and use right click to link as many output P2P as you need. Finally, fluids pushed into the input side of Fluid P2P connections are evenly distributed between its outputs. Fluids will be deposited round robin in the order that the output P2Ps were linked. Speaking of fluids, GTNH has a lot of them, and I mean a lot of them. You will definitely need to have robust and foolproof fluid storage for your mainnet. After a quick glance at things like PBI and epoxid lines, ABS fluids, and other random junk you will need to store, this might become daunting. My personal philosophy is to solve this with 2 sets of storage. A set of drives on mainnet that are filled with unfiltered multi-fluid cells, and an early game, localized super tanks for each fluid stored in bulk, like oxygen, visible to the network via a storage bus. This means that bulk fluids will never overflow into my unfiltered storage, which allows me to use the system unhindered. Fluid storage cells hold a lot more than you think. The smallest 1K fluid cell is able to store up to 2 million liters, or 2,000 buckets of fluid within. With a couple of unfiltered multi-fluid cells, you can easily hold random runoff from crafts like ABS and LCR recipes. Later on, when multiple processes produce things like oxygen in bulk, you can centralize bulk storage to partitioned cells or yacht tanks, which can hold septillions of a single fluid, using a sticky card to make sure that there is only one destination for each fluid. Once you grapple with fluid storage, you'll want to put it to use. The fluid discretizer is key for starting fluid autocrafting. Fluid discretizers create fluid droplet items in your ME system, which are used to send fluid autocrafting patterns in GTNH. These are simply placeholders for AE2FC to be able to send fluids correctly where they need to go. Make sure to only use one of these per network. After you install your fluid discretizer, you will need a fluid patterning terminal to program your patterns. When you pattern fluid recipes, you will notice that AE2FC will put a fluid packet in your pattern, which is actually an item. If you were to deliver this recipe through a normal interface, a fluid packet would come out the other side and be placed in your input bus. That's probably not good. This mechanic can be leveraged, however, as you have likely seen in my universal processing video, as packets and items can be sent together in item cells. To deal with fluid packets in universal processing systems, we use a packet decoder component on the receiving side to take fluid packets and turn them into fluids, which are pushed onto the connected network. Dual interfaces cut to the chase, skipping over the packet decoder. Fluid packets sent through dual interfaces will always be decoded into fluids and sent through any face that can receive fluids. This means that you will need to connect a place for both fluids and items to be deposited. A setup like this most sanely requires some subnetting, which we will get to soon. If you need to though, you can simply put a full block interface on an input bus and connect a Gregtech pipe to any side of the interface and it should accept the fluids. In addition to being able to stock items like normal interfaces, dual interfaces have a second menu on the top right where they can stock fluids. I use this all the time in conjunction with Gregtech pumps to quickly pull fluid into any machine. Alright, so I'm assuming at this point you all know about Gregtech multiblocks, and I'm going to get to the important part and cover some GTNH multiblock specific AE2 integrations. The first and most important GTNH specific AE2 integration are ME output buses and hatches. These buses act like an output bus facing an interface and can push output items and fluids directly onto the network. You can also add storage cells or craft them with storage parts to increase their cache size to incredible levels, making them a must-have as you progress. ME outputs can also cache an infinite amount of different types of items, which means that each multi-block will at most need one ME output of each type. If an item cannot be inserted into a network, however, the ME output will jam as items are deposited in order. Check the contents of an ME output by right-clicking it with the Gregtech scanner. The next important ME integrations are the ME stocking bus and its upgrade, the advanced stocking bus. ME stocking buses have 16 slots in which you can filter any item to be processed by a machine. It is important to know that ME stocking buses do not hold items. Instead, filtered items are still stored within the network that they are connected to and used upon recipe start. The upgraded version of these is called the advanced stocking bus, which unlocks in LUV and can be used most prevalently in ore processing and subnetted autocrafting. Advanced stocking buses have the functionality of regular stocking with the addition of autopull mode. Autopull will see any items within a connected network and attempt to use them for recipes. It is extremely important to never directly connect autopull advanced stocking buses to your main network. Not only can this cause immense lag, but in the hands of the wrong machine, i.e. a macerator, you might accidentally process all of your items. I recommend making a dedicated subnet for each autopull bus that you add to a machine, even if it's as simple as an ME chest that you insert items into to get autopulled. You can right-click the button in the middle to configure some settings, most importantly the recipe check on change, which will try to force an attached multiblock to look for a recipe to start whenever a new item enters the subnet. The ME stocking hatch and advanced stocking hatch are the fluid variation of these ME buses, which are unlocked much later in the game than their item counterparts. Functionally, they have the same behaviors and UIs and are a godsend for automation. Crafting input buses and buffers, also known as crib buses and crib buffers, are similarly tiered to stocking buses, where the fluid version is unlocked much later than the item version. A crib bus can hold item-only patterns directly, and when called, cribs will instantly wake a multiblock to start a craft. Crib buses have infinite internal storage and full input separation even within the same bus, so you will never have conflicts. Additionally, items like extruder shapes, circuits, and more can be placed within by pressing the Add Manual Items button. Crib buffers are the upgrade to crib buses, allowing fluid recipes. They are unlocked quite late into the game and serve as a lag reduction and sanity protector for late-game multi-block spam. Cribs will also override crafts from regular input buses, making them interesting for automating multis like the DTPF, which runs constant passive crafts, but needs to be interrupted for on-demand crafting. Crafting proxies are the key to your endgame success. Proxies require no channels and can be linked to cribs to share their recipes with a data stick, allowing you to easily parallelize hundreds of the same multi-block machines, which you will eventually need to do. Copy the frequency of a crib by crouching and left-clicking with the data stick, and then paste it by right-clicking the proxy. Because proxies are wireless, they can be placed in different orientations on a multi-block. Multi-blocks will always prioritize buses closer to the controller, which you can leverage to multi-thread processing on your array of multi-blocks by rotating the proxy location on each duplicate multi-block. This idea is called priority rotation and was originally documented by NeedMoney90 on the Discord. I'll link his tips and tricks post in the description. The concept is fascinating. Now that we have an exhaustive list of new tools for our tool belt, I'd like to show you some common applications. The most basic automation for multi-blocks, like the bender and the wire mill, looks like this, with multiple buses, each with different circuits, all in one multi-block. This lets you get away with one machine for likely all of its recipes. There are also multi-blocks that handle both fluids and items and need multiple different circuit types. These include early LCR, mixer, circuit assembler, and many more. My favorite setup for these looks like this, with multiple interfaces placed on different input buses, each with a different circuit number. Between your dual interfaces, a small subnet is set up with part interfaces to receive fluids from each side. Fluids are routed to a fluid storage bus, which deposits them into a shared quadruple input hatch. This allows one small machine to hold more than 6 different circuit types, all while sharing a single input hatch for fluids. Obviously, due to multi-threading capabilities and recipe conflicts, I prefer to use universal for most of these machines, but early on, and for specific machines like the large-scale auto-assembler, this simple automation works just fine. For machines with fewer than 2 circuits like EBFs, multi-smelters, autoclaves, and more, I use a different setup. This involves creating a subnet for items to be deposited within, whether that be a simple ME chest or a drive with item and fluid cells. I connect this to the multi-block via advanced stocking buses on autopull mode. Patterns are sent into the subnet either directly into an ME chest or via an interface and get automatically pulled and processed by the advanced stocking buses. Towards late game, input bus size can be a huge limiting factor for how quickly a machine can recognize and process inputs, which this solves. Note that circuits placed in the advanced stocking bus manually will be prioritized over internal circuits, which you can use to your advantage to prioritize circuit 11 over circuit 1 in blast furnace autocrafting. Alright, I think we have covered most of the important GTNH specific and advanced AE2 things, with the exception of annihilation planes, P2P interfaces, spatial AE, toggle buses, digital essentia. God damn it. I'm gonna have to make another video on this someday, aren't I? Well, for when that day comes, if you want to see anything specific that I haven't covered, please comment below. If this video was helpful to you in any way, a like, subscribe, comment, share, or anything else would be much appreciated, as these videos take a lot of time and work to make. For any AE2 or otherwise related questions, feel free to tune into my Twitch, where I stream nearly every day from 11 PM to 2 AM EST, and drop by my Discord to hang out. Finally, be kind to yourself and others, and peace.